And we continue reading on in Matthew 4, a little bit later after what Don read for us earlier. Listen now for the word of the Lord. As Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And he said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, in the boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets, and he called them. Immediately they left their boat and father and followed him. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all the sick, those who were afflicted with various diseases and pains, demoniacs, epileptics, paralytics, and he cured them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, I am a list person. Yeah, my wife is smiling. She knows this about me. I love lists. Call me strange. It's just one of the ways. Checklists, to-do lists, list of goals, shopping lists, inventory lists. It becomes a bit obsessive. She's rolling her eyes at me right now. Did I say a bit obsessive? You may laugh, but over the years, lists and list keeping has served me well. They give my days aim and direction, procedure. They help assure that things are less likely, at least, to be forgotten. I've learned with lists, I worry a lot less. There's less anxiety in my life. If something's troubling me, I can write it down and return to it later when I have time or energy. I'm less concerned that I'll forget things, that I'll leave things undone, that I'll run out of time. And believe me, less anxiety is good. Anxiety robs us of spiritual health. But again, those lists, they become a bit obsessive sometimes. I'll admit it. There's this voice in the back of my mind that nobody else can hear, but I hear it. It says, consult the list. As Presbyterians, we have a lot of wisdom in our committee structures, the documents that guide us that are something of a fleshed out list about how we're going to be governed and organized, how we're going to do things. When we meet, we have agendas. What's an agenda but a list of things we're going to talk about? Hopefully do something about eventually. Lists. I listened to a podcast called Cautionary Tales. Maybe you've heard it or listened to it, heard of it, but the host, describes these events in history. Usually sadly, they're tragic events, and they're often famous events, things you've heard about. You get to find out more about what happened and the series of mistakes that led to whatever that disaster was, right? And he does talk a lot about checklists can help us avoid those kinds of catastrophes. So seeking to avoid catastrophe in my life, I, again, have those lists. And a few years ago, just to demonstrate this point about me, I shared some lists with a different congregation. I'd like to share those same lists with you now. This is my camping list. Are you ready? Are you ready to hear the things that I feel like I and the Ulasewich family need when we go camping? Okay. First of all, you'll notice it's not one camping list, but there's a list of lists to consult. There's the camp master list, which lists the camp checking recreational, the camping recreational list, as well as the camping personal list, the camping kitchen list, the camping supply list, and then I add to that the hiking list and the general pack list, right? Because we need all those things too. And of course, this goes for like the 5 of us, so it's really like times 5. And then here's the camping supply list. So if you're ready, if you're thinking about going camping, you might want to write these down. Blankets, flashlights, rain gear, lantern and charger, dustpan, floor mat, doormat, all-purpose tool for my fishing tackle box. Matthew, thanks for reminding me of that. The weather radio, pillows, extension cords, first aid kit, firewood and lighter, laundry rack, shovel, fire extinguisher, hammer. Are you getting this? Blow-up mattress, air pump and 4D batteries, folding chairs, bear spray. That's for if we're going out west. Sleeping bags and a tent. Need a tent if we're going to camp. Then there's the kitchen list because we've got to eat. Cups, food. And the food has a sub list, but I won't get into all that. Cooler and ice, paper towels, plastic utensils, coffee mug, paper plates and bowls, dish bucket and towels, garbage bags, scissors, tablecloth and clips, stove and propane, coffee maker, filters and coffee because we already packed the coffee mugs, and why pack them? And why would they be on the list if you don't have the coffee maker and coffee and filters? Pans, sponges, spatula, dish soap, can opener, thermos, folding table. Camping personal list. We need a headlamp so we can see all the stuff that we brought, even in the dark. Sunscreen, sandals, swimming gear, water shoes, towels, hats, bug spray. That's a big one. Phones, we need our phones. Probably don't need that on the list. The list is on my phone. Sunglasses, cold weather gear, if it's going to be cold, and bring it anyway. Bathroom tissue, toiletries, tissues, wipes, lip balm. That one's good. And then the camp recreation list, because we're going to have fun, right? We need a recreational frisbee, disc golf frisbees, kids' toys, kickball, football, binoculars, and fishing gear. Now, when we had babies, the list was even longer. And anybody who's had a baby knows what I'm talking about, the extra stuff you've got to bring. But I won't read that list for you. When I shared this list with a prior congregation, there was an old Florida cowboy. Yes, that's more of a thing than you realize. Who, when he was younger, would go camping. He would get a blanket and get on his horse and be off for a couple days. And when he heard my list for camping, he laughed and laughed and laughed and talked about it for days. He said, I can't imagine you bringing all that stuff with you. He's right, I can't. Why did we do that? I'm a list person. Consult the list. So, when Matthew tells us in his gospel that when Jesus encountered Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, and he said, follow me, and Matthew uses the word twice, immediately they left everything and followed him. I struggle a little bit with that. Can't imagine why, can you? How immediately is immediately? I mean, how about next day, Jesus? I need to consult my calendar. I need to look at my to-do list for the rest of today and tomorrow. I need to look and see if this is a good time. I know I have a pack list to address and things to tend to before we go. Nope. No. Matthew says specifically, they immediately left their nets. They left their nets. They were fishers. That was their job. If something happened to their nets, they'd be out a career. They left their nets. That's immediate. And as if that's not enough, James and John, they left their boat and their father. I don't know if I could do that. How about you? So our church, we're going through a church-wide study of Simon Peter. And adults, as part of this, adults are reading the book Simon Peter by Adam Hamilton, pastor in the Kansas City area. And we do hope you will join us. There's Sunday school for all ages, and it's a wonderful conversation that we're having. But one of the things that adults are learning is, Adam Hamilton calls Peter flawed but faithful. And he is. He is flawed, but he is faithful. And we can see in Peter, in all four of the Gospels, someone who is rather impulsive at times. He speaks without listening, and that may sound familiar. I think we all do that. But he does it a lot. And he does it often enough that the Gospel writers really take note of it and point it out, kind of over and over and over again. And he says really good things that way, right? Like, you are the Messiah. Or, Jesus, call me to walk to you. And he walked on the water, right? But then he also says some things that Jesus had to rebuke him for, and even said, get away from me, Satan, to Peter. You're not talking from God's perspective. You're talking from a human one, right? Here's the thing. I can't judge at all Peter's foibles, the times that he misses the mark, the times that he speaks impetuously and doesn't get it right. You know why? Because he followed him immediately. And he followed him faithfully. Whether he got it right or wrong, he put his life on the line and gave himself for his Lord. Now, yeah, we can make too big a deal maybe out of that word immediately. In Luke, actually, there's a little bit more to the story. In Luke's gospel, Jesus goes and sees them fishing, and he borrows their boat, and he goes out into the water and uses the boat as kind of an amphitheater, a place to stand for him, a platform to speak to the people on the beach, and it makes a great auditorium. And then he tells Peter to let down his net, and they do, even though Peter doesn't want to because he's tired, and he'll have to wash his net again. But he does, and he catches so many fish it threatens to swamp their boat and James and John's boat, right? Then he immediately follows Jesus when he calls him. In John, there's even more of the story in an encounter that they had had in Jerusalem before this story even takes place. But regardless of whether they had encountered each other before, regardless of what miracles Jesus performed in their midst, the thing is, Peter still went immediately, and so did his brother Andrew, and so did their friends James and John. That's amazing. It's amazing. And look at what happens the rest of that passage. Just that passage, not even the gospel, just the rest of what we read this morning, the curings that happen, and the crowds that are attracted to hearing this amazing good news that Jesus is speaking to, that followed them. And look, yeah, it is good. It is good to plan and to anticipate and to use checklists and be systematic and to be wise. And yet, as John Lennon sang, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Those lists, those policies, those procedures, those sound structures that we try to put in place, they're our attempt to bring order out of chaos. And that's a good thing. Don't hear me criticizing that. It's in our genes to bring order. We were created. God breathed life into us and placed us in a garden to tend it. What do you do with a garden? But continue to try to make it orderly in a place that wants to either grow or not. Either way, become chaos without our tending. We were made to bring order in a chaotic environment. So there's nothing wrong with our lists and our agendas and our procedures and our careful structures. We just have to understand that even for all that, there is more chaos in life and in the world than we can tame. And I'm sorry to tell you that. But there are storms, and there are wildfires, and there are medical diagnoses, and there are Dear John and Dear Jane letters, and there are phone calls at 3 a.m., company layoffs, sirens headed down your street, pipes that burst in church hallways. Yeah. We can prepare for the unexpected, but we don't know what we don't know, right? And we don't always know what's going to happen next, as much as we try to plan. We really can thank God that God walked into the midst of all of that to walk with us through that, through whatever may happen, through whatever may come. God walks with us through that. And in the person of Jesus Christ, who rebuked and calmed those waves, by the way, he comes to reorder our messy lives and this chaotic world. And do we really understand what a sacrifice that was for God, the Son of God, to enter into this with us? He sacrificed so much before even getting to the cross. But God doesn't leave us in our own chaos. He comes and he calls. He comes for us and he calls us to step with him through that to something better. Are you ready to follow? Now. What's holding you back? Holding you back from following more boldly, more faithfully, more immediately. You don't have to be perfect. Rest assured. Peter wasn't. He was flawed, but he was faithful. And I'm not saying we can never question. We just do it immediately and we don't even ask why God may be doing this with our lives. No, I'm not saying that either. Sure, we can question. Sure. Well, let's question while we walk alongside God in our lives. Talk to God while he walks with us. And I'm not saying we shouldn't plan, prepare, or be ready. I'm going to keep my lists. I don't know about you. But when the author of life calls, are we going to send it to voicemail with the best of intentions of getting back to it sometime later? Or will we be ready? Immediately? Immediately. Wow. Amen.